people forget this about Title IX. It's just not about sports. It was also the time where women had opportunities in law school, medical school. So I was going to be, pre-med.
While I was at NACWA, we had I was the Director of Education and Professional Development, and we had Title IX education sessions for the women that attended our professional development workshops. And one was moderated by Dr. Christine Grant, who is a pioneer in women's athletics. And to sit there and listen to all of the battles that she and the women of her generation fought, to hear about the first organized sport for women in the AIAW before women were allowed to participate in the NCAA. Just really being exposed to the history and the battles fought in Title IX, and learning about what Title IX means today in terms of providing equitable experiences. So I'd say working at NACWA and just being exposed to those women in athletics that fought the battles and helped get us to where we are today is when I first really became aware of the significance of Title IX.
Once I became a GA, and we were in a pretty football dominant area, in South Georgia, and it really made me realize just how much, a man's world I was in. I mean, we were, most of my coaching professors were men. It was just, hardly any females in the department. The few who were like me. They were graduate assistants, but I didn't necessarily see the role of the head coach in a female, in that department. So that really struck me.
It wasn't until I was in my master's classes that I really got a grasp of what Title IX was and what all it encompassed. Before, it was just equity. You think of it as just equity. But when you really get to dive into it and see that it's so many other levels that you have to look at to make sure that you're in compliance.
I think once I got into athletics, it wasn't anything I had thought about before. I became very aware, even in finances, because I had to provide information on facilities and what we were funding and fundraising and, the male versus female. And then also I know that in that former position, we had an increase in the student fee specifically geared towards adding women's sports, I think in the early 90s. So I knew about that piece because it's like, why is this piece separate from everything else? Why does this work different? And that it's not just budget, it's facilities and it's academics, it's everything applied to the student athletes to make sure that everything is fair between the genders.
Growing up, when I graduating from high school in the late 90s and starting college then, Title IX to me was really about the opportunities. Got to see a lot of women's sports added at that time, field hockey, rowing, water polo, things like that. So got to see a lot of women get opportunities that they wouldn't have gotten. And as we've gone through, UNC Asheville's gotten to add a few women's teams because of Title IX, women's swimming, women's golf. And so that's been exciting to provide opportunities to some more ladies to come play sports at college.
Like my generation versus older generations, I didn't really think about Title IX. It wasn't something that I had to really worry about. We weren't really fighting for things. Sure, there was inequities that we saw, but we weren't trying to just get in the door. So now I think as SWA in the past few years, getting involved with women leaders and really just having a true appreciation that it was not that long ago that women weren't able to do what I was able to do and do it without thinking that I just get to go play. They had to fight to go play.
Fairly early on in my career I did, because when I first started at Longwood, I was one of 3 females that were not coaches in the administration. Now looking as it's grown, we have a lot more, and the majority of our administration now is actually female. I actually employ an entire female staff, not on purpose, it just kind of happened. But I think that gives us a lot of perks and it helps grow in college athletics as well as the profession. So I think those are probably the biggest things, is just noticing little things like that.
Over the years of seeing people, women in their roles be successful, and getting to kind of followed behind them has been really neat, and gotten to see, be a part of a lot of great opportunities or a lot of great success, and a lot of those times it's been attributed to the women in those roles. And so I very much see that there is a place for us here that I may not have seen before.
When I was coaching at Alabama, it was clear, and I was just, again, I felt very fortunate because we had so much of a balance, because you can see clearly how it would be if it wasn't that way. There are high schools that still aren't seeing that, and that's the unfortunate thing. Being the AD at these two private prep schools, we were fortunate there that things were much more fair and across the board, but you could see it at other schools. So I think it's always available to see, but it's always also available to see that things are moving in a much better fashion than they ever were before.
Well, I really didn't until I came to Gardner-Webb. I was a young person in the 70s, and I know that living in a rural community, we were not educated about Title IX, and it was something that I didn't see until I was older and understood. So it's not being educated about it is I guess a hindrance to me in my early years, but now I think that is one of the important things we need to do as a society is the word educate.
The thing that I think that mostly that you noticed was the opportunities. There weren't that many wide opportunities like there are now. In high school we were state champions, so you didn't really feel an inequity because there was such a strong following with a good team. I played with Gina Beasley, who was a Kodak All-American at NC State, and we had a great following. So I didn't really begin to notice those things until about the time that I got to college, which was actually about a year after Title IX was enacted.